I'm very pleased now to be joined by the CFL on TSN's Glen Suitor. And Glenn, when you think about everything we could talk about since we've last spoken, I mean, where do you want to start? That everybody seems to be really involved in what's been happening in the last month in the CFL.
Yeah, I think we went through sort of the initial shock and awe of free agency, which was fun out of the gate for the first couple of days for sure. It's obviously quieted down since then, but interesting that the good teams, the teams that were in the championship, the teams that were in the finals, really did a good job of keeping their core together. And Hamilton's one of those teams, and that's when you have the winning formula, you have the culture in the locker room. You don't want to mess with that too much. I mean, there has been exceptions to that, like Kenny Lawler in Winnipeg that moved on and got a nice deal, a big contract. I think that was significant. And the other one is interesting to me is Edmonton. I think they're doing great things off the field with their new management, but with Chris Jones and bringing in let's say mature players.
Do you want to just say it? Do you want to just say it, Suits? I mean, do you want to just name them while you're here?
Well, when you think of Manny Arsenault and Darius Bowman and Duron Carter, those are two guys that are up there in age, one of which hasn't played a long time. Manny's played a little bit, and he is gym rat, so I'm not too worried about his sort of physical conditioning. And then you have Duron Carter, who, he comes with a bit of a history, good and bad. So it makes for an interesting dynamic on that team. Certainly one that will have tons of storylines going in that first month of the season. But how Chris Jones molds that group together and who's going to play quarterback for them is still a big question. But teams like Ottawa have done well, and they've got their guy, and Hamilton has their guy. That was sorted out early, and so it's interesting.
Yeah, and let's talk about Ottawa real quick, because I feel like I saw Chris O'Leary was writing about it this week at CFL.ca about, is this one of those years where we can look at the East of maybe having a better result than the West? Because, Ottawa got a lot better, at least on paper. And if anyone can kind of get that group figured out, it seems like Lapo might be the guy.
Yeah, I think they did the right thing by giving him a chance to sort of build a roster that he wants to. I think it's silly when a team brings in a brand new coach and within a year or year and a half, they say goodbye to him. That's just not right. It's not fair to a coach. He needs time to put his core together, get the right people in that locker room. Again, I'm a big proponent that skill is part of the pie. If it's a pie graph, skill and athleticism is part of that, but it's not the biggest part, because when you get to the pro level, they're all good. So that piece of the pie for athleticism and skill is almost the same on every team. And that's what you alluded to, that through free agency and Ottawa getting their quarterback, and the fact that they've now putting together a nice looking roster with skilled players, well, that just means that their skill is that same size of the piece of pie that the rest of the league has. And all of them feel good about that right now. I think you can go across the board, and I think every coach would tell you, I feel pretty good about my team right now. So now what's the difference? What takes Hamilton further than Ottawa? Or what puts Winnipeg over the top, back-to-back champions? That's the culture. That's the character. That's the humility. Those type of things that guys like Coach O know all about, and they preach all the time, and that's why they're good teams.
You mentioned the word character there, and I think of this league is full of characters, and we were talking about this when we were setting this up, that it has been a busy month, and it is nice to see headlines every week with the certainty of the near certainty of a season, right? A full season, full stadiums. How does this CFL kind of capitalize on this? How can the teams? How can the players, where can we go from here? So, yes, the rosters seem mostly built. Combine's coming up. How can we keep this kind of momentum going right up until training camp starts May 11th?
Yeah, it's a great question because there's a lot to unpack there. And this is a golden opportunity for the league. I think unprecedented opportunity, an opportunity like never before, because right now, as we speak, the CFL Players Association are beginning their internal meetings to get ready for negotiations on a new CBA. This is going to be very, very important as a reset, a chance to really build. There are potentials here for the league for new revenues. When you talk about gambling specifically and how new sponsorship through the gambling and the ability to gamble is going to help the league and help each team individually and the players by extension. So this is the opportunity with that perspective, a lost season. We know that it can be taken from us, everybody. Both sides in these negotiations will know that. They go into that room with that perception now, or perspective, I should say now. So they go in with that perspective, and they got the one season in. It was shortened, but you know how fragile it was, because a week and a half, 2 weeks after Grey Cup, we were into another variant, and had the Grey Cup been then, we might not have been able to play it. So, they understand that now, and now I hope that will lead to a couple of things. One, it'll lead to, with revenue sharing as part of the model now, the business model, that will lead to transparency. Every team is going to have a pretty good understanding of the other team's finances. In order to have revenue sharing, you need that transparency. Then, if that transparency is there, and it should be, you have built trust for the Players Association to see that all the teams, here's what the business model actually looks like. That way they can build. This is what I hope for, Louie, and I think I know people roll their eyes when I say this, and they have for the last couple of weeks. But I hope they can get to an agreement on a 7 to 10 year CBA. And I know that sounds unrealistic in some ways based on the history. But because of the new transparency, because of the new revenue sharing, and the potential of new revenues, serious new revenues, I hope they look at a long-term deal, because if we can get a long-term 7 to 10 year CBA, now we can build and market players staying in their communities longer. No more 1 year contracts, 2 or 3 year contracts, and 7 to 10 years of building. You know what that does? It takes a kid that's 10 years old right now that might visit a Hamilton Tiger Cat in his touch football camp. It takes him to when he's taking his girlfriend or his partner to a football game. It takes him to 22 years old if we have a CBA that they can build on. So I hope that's part of the discussion. It's happening as we speak. So let's hope they can get there.
And there really is a great marketing opportunity here to really, when the season rolls around come June, people are going to want to be getting outside. People are going to be getting back with their friends, really, and coast to coast. The league is in a really great spot to really market this across the board.
Yeah, after the Spanish flu, the world just sort of blew up. I mean, it was the Roaring 30s or whatever they called it, and it was, everybody was out. They were dancing, they were partying, they loved it. And I think, again, that's the opportunity that's right in front of our league, is to take advantage of this pent up need for people to get together. And plus, we're in such a polarizing world right now. We're in such a divisive world. I mean, everything that's happened in Ukraine and all that's going on, we seem to be just fighting at every turn with each other. And sports brings us, as you know, sports brings us together. It's that one commonality of a community. So you go to a Ticat game, you are surrounded by people wearing the same stuff, and you're together for the first time. That's different religions, that's different politics, but on that 3-hour day, you are in the game together for your team. So we need sports to bring us together, I believe, and this is the opportunity the league has. Now, can we take full advantage of it? Because if we don't clean it up, if we don't look at how we can make this a long-term marketing possibility, 7 to 10 years, The NFL, I read this on Twitter, so I don't know all the details, and I'm very reluctant to ever trust Twitter. But the NFL just did a 10-year deal apparently with their CBA. I think they're thinking the same way when they did that. We can't every 3 years negotiate this new deal and have the negative press. That's the one other thing, Louie, I'll say, and I know you want to get to the next question, but the narrative and this hamster wheel that we as Canadians, and I include myself in this, have been on for as long as I can remember being involved with this league directly, either as a player or an analyst, and that's over 30 years now. And we're on the same hamster wheel every offseason. There's a league down south that's going to put us in trouble. There's finance issues. There's issues with the PA versus the league. The issues are, is it the NFL? Is it not the NFL? Is there any way you can put a team from the NFL in Toronto? All of these things is the same hamster wheel for over 30 years. Can we just jump off that finally? Can we just say, listen, we have a great league that is composed of and made up of world-class athletes and world-class coaches and administrators. Let's be proud of it. It's ours. It doesn't have to be the NFL. It is our unique game. It has different rules, which separates it, not better or worse, just different. And let's just be proud of it as Canadians and get off the hamster wheel of every single time something happens south of the border, we go, oh, now we're in trouble. Now we've got to deal with this. We have great athletes. Let's build our league and let's continue to grow it. And that's what a 7 to 10 year deal would do.
And it's such a great point. And you mentioned that fan who's, introduced to the team, who's introduced to the sport from a visit, even at school, right? And you talk about Hamilton being out in the community, and Courtney Stevens doing such a great job with that now, making sure that people are out in the community. But also, I guess the Ticats, because I'm so close to it, I know what they've done is they've really turned the stadium into an experience. So
love it. Yeah.
There's a lot of times where I'll find myself in one of the banquet zones, and there's more people focused on just having a good time with their friends and being at the game. And it's a great model for other teams to follow. But like you said, that starts with that security of, long-term labor peace. And you mentioned popularity. We're hearing those negative stories coming out from the MLB, right, with their labor negotiations.
Exactly.
And it's just a PR nightmare.
Yeah, I sometimes fans will come up to me and they'll say, okay, I hear what you're saying, Glenn, and I agree with you. Well, what can I do? What can I do to help? And here's what you can do to help. You can just block or unfollow that same old hamster wheel narrative that keeps coming out, sometimes from people that should know better, to be honest. I don't need to bring up names. And sometimes there are people that work under the umbrella of the rights holders. And that happens too. But if you just decide that you're not going to follow that, you're not going down that rabbit hole any longer, you're going to go to that Hamilton Tiger Cat experience, you're going to be there with your buddies, you're going to bring it all together with your family, you're going to have a great afternoon in the sun, in the summer, watching a very good football team and the best game of the world. Best game of the world on TV, best game of the world to see live. It is a fun game to watch. It's got a little bit of everything, as you know, world-class athletes in our league. Yeah. They're world-class athletes in our league. And that's the narrative that we got to keep hammering home, because it's true. That is the truth of it. And now how does a fan help? A fan just, it's kind of like when I always get ribbed for my love of music, and my love of music is country. I love country music. And I hear the same old things. Well, in country music, you lose your truck and your girlfriend and your horse, and that's country music. I say, that joke is 60 years old and it's dead. It's really dead. And I blow it off now, not following it. I love my country music. I'm proud of it. If you don't like it, then tell me what you like and sell me on your thing. Yeah. That's what fans can do individually. And if we have enough of those fans, we're going to fill stadiums.
And you know what? It's such a great point, not just for sports, but for life, right? I mean, you don't have to engage with everybody. And every time I see a comment on, a Sportsnet article or a TSN article talking about CFL, and the first response is, "What's the CFL?" Yes, people's ignorance, people's arrogance. It's not something to get worked up over. But again, good advice, not just for football or sports, but good advice for life, Suits. Thank you for doing this.
Block that guy. I'll give you one more just as I leave. John Tory was the intern, of course, in Toronto now, in government in Toronto, but he was the interim commissioner of the league for a while. And he had a great quote, and I've used it many times. And he said, if sometimes I believe the way Canadians are, and in some ways it's a strength, but sometimes I believe if Canadians were voted the best country in the world, Canada was, Canadians would ask for a recount. I thought, why do we do that? You don't have to kick it. Enjoy it. Have a great time. That's what CFL football is all about.
And that is a perfect way to end this conversation. Suits, I always feel a lot smarter after we talk, always much more informed. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Louie.